Have you ever heard of overtraining syndrome? I certainly hadn't before reading this article. So today we're going to talk all things rest and recovery.
Hey everyone, this is Aaron and Juwon, and you're listening to Wellness for Real People. This show is for people who are on the go, busy, and looking for ways to live their best lives. We focus on wellness topics in mindfulness, exercise, diet, and sleep, and share quick, actionable tactics to improve your health and wellness. We're not perfect, but we're trying to get a little better each day. Let's grow on this journey together.
Back with another episode of Wellness for Real People with my co-host Aaron. And Aaron, I got into this article initially because it was talking about sleep, which is something that is really, really important. Something one of the core pillars of our show. And so we'll talk about sleep as an important component of rest and recovery. But rest and recovery goes much deeper than that, and I'm excited to get into some of these ideas and topics in this article from a recent article from UC Health, University of Colorado Health. Before we dive into the specifics, what specifically jumped out to you, or what generally jumped out to you as you kind of breezing through the article?
I think the biggest thing for me was really understanding that how critical rest and recovery is for everyone and not just for athletes or younger people. It's really essential for everyone, which is why this show is called Wellness for Real People. So it's not that we're talking about someone that's very in a specific athletic, highly specialized field. It's really, really critical for everybody, including us, folks that are just living our day-to-day lives. So the article was really, really good. And really, I think about rest and recovery as sleep, as you mentioned at the top of the intro. And so we're going to kick it off with that part about why sleep is so important and why prioritizing it is important. But then some of the other things that really stood out to me are some of the other ways that you can recover, including stretching, refueling, and then some of the other things that you do throughout the week to make sure that you're also recovering and helping your body.
Yeah, let's dive into it. Um, so the author says that uh, if you're exercising and operating in this high cortisol state all of the time, right? You may not even. Hopefully, you do have some exercise routine as a part of your, consistent weekly practice. But even without that, we tend to live very, very busy lives, and it can get really, really stressful between work and family and all the other commitments that we have, right? And so it says if we're in this kind of high cortisol state all the time, we're not getting back to that rest and digest state, and so the body is never really able to heal. And so that can have implications on injury, on illness, on our strength production, on our mood, essentially, on everything. And so, rest, as you mentioned, Aaron, really is fundamentally, starts with sleep, but really, really taking some time to really think even beyond that around, what can we do to kind of off cycle, get out of that kind of, busy, hectic kind of mindset and state, and really think about being conscious and mindful of moving into more of a restful state, because it really is critical for our long-term health.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that's important too is even some of the pre workout prep that happens and things that we should probably be thinking about and considering. Something I didn't really consider is just the benefits of dynamic stretching versus static stretching and kind of what that impact has. Well, the article talks a lot about, from an athletic standpoint, the impacts, but also really understanding that for us, as we're getting into our day to days, we're getting ready to do a workout, a lifting session, or whatever it is. The article kind of leans more towards dynamic stretching in order to kind of warm up those muscles, not doing anything too strenuous, but in a way that can help to encourage you to have a better performance, but then also after the exercise to be able to recover and rest a lot more effectively than some of the static stretching. So the article says, like, skip static stretching unless you really like it. But one of the things that the article says that a lot of people love stretching. There's a decreased perception of pain, but at the end of the day, it may or may not be really beneficial to your overall impact of what you're looking to do. And so it might decrease some muscle soreness, but research has shown that there's not really a clear benefit to overall performance. And so something to think about as we head into our workouts, as we get ready, or even after the workout, incorporating some of that stretching as part of that recovery process. So we're not as fatigued, we're not as worn out, because we'll have that temporary relief from the static, but maybe thinking long term, something I didn't think about is the impact of that dynamic stretching.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? As you mentioned, before and after is
Yes.
really, really part of that recovery process. And when I'm younger, I used to just run, 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 go, 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 and then just stop, whatever, do
Yeah,
whatever.
you
But
can
now,
stop and
like
do
you
whatever you want after that. It's fine. Let me go do my job and get back to work. But yeah, no.
right, right. But nowadays, no, got to be mindful. Got to, yeah,
Yeah.
warm things up a little bit, do the exercise, do the activity. And then after I'm done, take that time, like you mentioned, to do some dynamic stretching to help those muscles really recover. I think it's really, really important. Um, the article talks about the importance of building rest days into training, but also I think that's just into life. I think, I think it's really, really important. One thing I try to do at least one day a week, just one day a week, where I turn the computer off. I don't check emails. I don't do any work whatsoever as a way to just try to relax, recharge my body a little bit. And I found that to be really, really helpful to just kind of clear my mind a little bit and get myself ready and back in go mode, for the week ahead. So, this idea of like building rest into our kind of weekly, monthly cadence, and it's like these short breaks and rest and recovery, but also these longer opportunities for rest and recovery, which I thought was really interesting that they went into in the article, right? This kind of short term versus long term recovery. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's like from well, we talked kind of a little bit about what those short term progresses in terms of like taking that day off or whatever you need. And I noticed for myself when I'm just like going through like week to week to week and not really taking any days off to rest, I can feel the difference mentally, physically as well too. I just feel off. My energy levels are down. It takes me longer to focus and concentrate on what I'm doing, and I'm trying to push through more so than when I'm rested, where I could just get into the groove and things are clicking. And so I definitely feel that from a longer term perspective as well. There's a lot involved in that recovery period. And so sometimes what they say is if you've gone through a period of really intense training over, let's say, a couple weeks, you might take a full week off. And while that seems like you're going to lose a lot of that progress, it's actually more productive to take that time off to give your body time to rest and recover during that period of time, which is something I didn't think about. I'm not an athlete in that sense. And so I was thinking, oh yeah, if you just keep burning the oil, keep going, keep grinding, your body will be fine. But actually it's more beneficial to have that downtime, to like even take a significant amount of time to really recover after that long period of activity to get your body back to a normal state. And you'll see those gains and benefits from it more so than just constantly burning yourself out.
Absolutely, absolutely. That kind of leads into this. I always talked about at the top of the show, right? This overtraining, right? And
Yes,
so
yeah, well, yeah.
it happens. And again, we're talking from the context of training from a physical perspective. I think it's just life too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we can talk about physical training, but also just the life demands that are the stresses that are put on us, right? And so I think we all go through these periods where we just feel like we're overwhelmed,
Mm.
and some of the signs to look out for overtraining. It is general feelings of fatigue, right?
Yep.
Feeling like even if I'm sleeping, I'm not really feeling like I'm back to 100%. I'm still feeling sluggish and groggy, consistently. That's a sign maybe you're overdoing it a little bit, right? Unexplained decrease in performance, mental
Mm-hmm.
performance, but also physical performance, right? And that can last from 1 week to a month, right? You're starting to see like consistent decrease, right, over that
Right.
time frame, and you start to see excessive musculoskeletal aches and pains. Now I'm getting older, so I'm pretty much have an ache and pain almost every day.
But you know the difference when you're just like you're just overdoing it. You can feel the difference. There's some general like your bones might click and crack a little bit here and there, but when you overdo it, you could tell.
Yeah, yeah. So I think
Yeah,
that's a really good, just some simple things to look out for, whether
yeah,
you're again training physically from an exercise perspective or just going through life, right? If you're starting to feel these things, maybe it's a sign your body's trying to tell you, okay, take a break, right? Pause, whether that's for a day or if you need more time for an extended period of rest and recovery, like you mentioned, give yourself a week, 10 days, if you can, right? To
right,
just
right.
kind of tone it down a little bit, give your body a chance to recover. So I think, as we talked about so often in the show, the importance of sleep as a foundation of all of that. One of the contributors to the author said, sleep is really, really important, actually super important, because it's about muscle repair, and a lot of that muscle repair and growth happens during sleep, right? And so really important that We'll link to other episodes in the show notes of that we've done on the importance of sleep and how to develop a good sleep routine. But I think that's a critical component of this rest and recovery. And it's different, different recommendations based on age. They say children 6 to 12 should get 9 to 12 hours. Teenagers can 13, 18 should get 8 to 10 hours. Everybody's sleep equation is a little bit different. But ultimately, it's not just about the number of hours of sleep that you're getting, but the quality of the sleep that you're getting as well is something to be keeping in mind and keeping a track of.
Yeah. And I'll just close with my last kind of comments and thoughts. And one part of the article talks about refueling and when you should refuel. And there's some debate on pre, post, and during the event or during the workout. But just in general, being conscious about what you put in your body. I think the episode we did with Joe Todd highlights that really well. So for the folks on the show, if you go back to our blog, you can find that episode pretty easily. We can also throw it in the show notes for you guys as well. But I do think that's another important part about it too is the diet portion of our core components of what we talked about, mindfulness, exercise, diet, and sleep. And so something to keep in mind too, as part of your recovery is the things that you're putting in your body throughout. And so Joe did a great job of really diving into that from an expertise standpoint. So we'll highlight that, but also just wanted to close on that and something that we want to keep top of mind going forward.
Absolutely, yeah. So we talked about a lot. It was about rest and recovery and how important that is. But as we've gone into and we learned through this article, right, there are other factors that play into your ability to rest and recover, your ability, to be aware of how much you're pushing yourself. How well are you keeping track of your sleep hygiene and developing a great sleep routine? Do you have a plan for active recovery, short term and long term? And then, as you mentioned, the important piece around how are you fueling your body so that it has the nutrients and energy. It can provide you the energy that you need to actually repair and when you're in that recovery process. So I think that was a great way to kind of close us out. So thank you all again for joining us for another episode. We'll be back soon with Wellness for Real People. In the meantime, take care.
Thanks, everyone.